Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, colleagues, depending which time zone you are. And warm welcome to everyone who joins us today for the second Environmental Management Group Nexus Dialogue. Today we will be focusing on inclusivity, sustainability, and integration of bioeconomy in the global environment agenda. This session is organized by the EMG, or short for UN Environmental Management Group, in collaboration with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. My name is Lev Neritin. I am environment lead at FAO, and I have a pleasure and privilege to moderate the event today. And as many of you know, we gather today on a World Environment Day. And this year, the day is dedicated to the urgent call to beat plastic pollution. It's important to recognize that bioeconomy represents one of the, in our opinion, humanity's greatest opportunities to restore planetary health and secure a sustainable future. Because bioeconomy harnesses renewable biological resources, plants, animals, microorganisms, fungi, to produce food, energy, industrial goods, and by doing so, its economic paradigm, which is replacing fossil-based and non-biodegradable materials, for example, like single-use plastics, with renewable, often circular, and nature-based alternatives. So the transition away from fossil fuels towards bioeconomy is far more than a technical fix. And if it's done sustainably, it could offer transformative pathways to address the root causes of pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss, and it's not less important, by creating greener and fairer economies. At FAO, as you all know, our main mandate is to defeat hunger. Therefore, we see bioeconomy as a cornerstone for transforming agri-food systems to make them more resilient, more circular, more inclusive. For us, bioeconomy offers immense potential to drive innovation, reduce environmental footprint, and create livelihoods, often in rural areas, new opportunities, new jobs for farmers and local communities, while supporting global sustainability goals. We specifically at FAO support governments to design and implement national bioeconomy strategies. We have developed sustainability frameworks, and we are providing policy guidance to ensure that bioeconomy transitions are grounded in equity and environmental integrity and competitiveness. We continue to facilitate international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and investment in bioeconomy for sustainable food and agriculture. Across the globe, the momentum for bioeconomy is rapidly accelerating. From G20 last year, continuing this year, bioeconomy is now widely recognized as a vital driver for green growth and systemic transformation. It reaches now UN level also, and the meeting today is the important manifestation of this development. Today's dialogue is about forging stronger connections between bioeconomy and global key environmental processes. We will be speaking today about UNFCCC, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the road to COP30, end of the year. We'll be talking about Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework on the CBD, and we'll be talking about land restoration priorities of the UN Convention to combat desertification. Bioeconomy cannot only afford to remain in isolation. It must be fully integrated into the broader global agenda, serving as a bridge that links all these different dimensions of sustainability. Just as important as the question to bridging these different dimensions of environmental sustainability, it's also important that bioeconomy is inclusive, so that it does include indigenous peoples, smallholders, women, and youth. And not only that their rights are protected by development bioeconomy, but also these groups are empowered. Today's panel brings together diverse leaders across regions and institutions. And I invite you to listen, reflect, and engage during this 1.5 hours we have, already less. So please use chat function to introduce yourself, to share your relevant work, and also to ask questions to our speakers at the end of this session. So again, thank you very much for joining us today, and let's begin this important conversation. So we will start today focusing on the importance of multilateralism to advance bioeconomy worldwide. And we will be focusing on 3 Rio conventions, as I already mentioned before. Our first speaker today is an extraordinary voice. I'm really pleased to introduce Honorable Professor Ruth Onyango. Ruth is a pioneering nutritionist. She's academic. She's a food system leader over several decades. She's the founder of Rural Outreach Program Africa. She's a former member of parliament in Kenya and the recipient of Africa Food Prize. Her work spans grassroots empowerment. Ruth, I think so your pioneering work in nutrition and rural development has long emphasized the community-driven solutions, especially for Africa food systems. And my question to you, how you feel that African nations can leverage this very rich and diverse local agroecological knowledge and homegrown innovations to shape bioeconomy development that specifically targets challenges of hunger, malnutrition, and addresses the most immediate problems which are faced poor people, poor communities and marginalized communities. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Lev. And first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to participate in this discourse, and also to wish everyone a great Environment Day. And also for bringing in the panelists, and also to just welcome participants on this. You know, I've been around for a long time. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. But one thing I've realized that so long as you're working on food issues, it's very difficult to retire, because we don't seem to have found the answer to eradicating hunger. And you work with the Food and Agriculture Organization. I used to be a consultant for you guys a long time ago, going to Rome and working with the farmers, with technical support, and also with some. What has happened in the recent past is, whereas globalization was meant to bridge the gaps between different sectors of the world, it has actually created more divisions and more distance. And now we find that global is on one end and that local is at the other end. And for me, who tries to bring science and technical knowledge to farmers on the ground, I find that the globe is going forward, going with different technologies, going up, trying to go to the moon now, you know, and the ground more or less stays where it is. And I just feel that as scientists and as professionals, we have not appreciated enough what the local communities know. So as an academic, I went to the ground and I kept asking myself, why does Africa continue to be hungry? Why does Africa always show malnourished children, when I know that a healthy African child, including my own, can be beautiful children? Why is Africa always begging for help, when I know that at one time, Africa had enough to feed itself? And why do we find ourselves in the situation we're in, when I know that in terms of bioeconomy, in terms of natural resources, Africa is really the richest continent we have on Earth? And so what is it? And so I started to look at the issues of governance. I started to look at the issues of policy. I started to look at the issues of how scientists ourselves do not acknowledge what the local communities do. You know, we arrive, we ask them questions, we give them hope, we go, we publish papers, we don't even acknowledge them. So I just feel that we need to look at all these issues because the problem facing the world right now is common to all of us. We need each other. No one is spared here. Whether you are in the north, in the south, east, or west, whether you are educated or you are not, right now, what is facing the world is a crisis that we all need to work on. And if we do, we need to accept everyone so that we can really appreciate each and everyone. Yeah.
Ruth, thank you so much for this inspiring words. I mean, if I may ask you, could you please say just a couple words about how to support this local knowledge for the benefit of bioeconomy? What conditions governments, investors can create in this regard? I know it's a big question.
It's a big question, but I just be simple with it. In that, as I went to the ground as an academic, actually live, I became the student. I became the student, and I think over the years, it's now for 4 decades, I've become a better person. I'm more knowledgeable because I became the student. I humbled myself and I listened. And when you do that, then the local community accepts you, and then you can begin to move forward. And you might find many of the answers actually in those communities. And that's where we have failed. We have not appreciated what they know. We have not documented what they know. We call it indigenous knowledge. You know, these are knowledge that has actually kept the world going. And so what condition do we need to create? We need equity. We need to appreciate. We need to respect. We need also to compensate. We need to acknowledge. We need to provide resources, and we need to make their lives better, because our lives keep getting better, but theirs keep getting worse, especially given the climate crisis we are facing right now. So I don't know who is going to create that environment, but all of us have a responsibility. And I will talk to policymakers, governments, donors as well, that at the end of the day, answers may be lying with these local communities.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this.
Yes.
I think now we are moving to our next speaker. We will return back to Ruth and all other speakers again. But so it's my pleasure to welcome Marcelo Bihar. Marcelo is the Brazil Special Envoy for Bioeconomy for the next conference of the party in Belém. Marcelo is a former Vice President of Sustainability at Natura Company, and he brings decades of leadership at the intersection between public policy, corporate sustainability, climate governance. He plays obviously a key role in aligning Brazil's national bioeconomy ambitions with the global action through G20 and also road to COP30. Marcelo is a special envoy for bioeconomy at COP30. Could you please share with us how this next COP, which actually will be the first COP, elevating bioeconomy to this level, how this COP will be building on the legacy of Brazil's G20 presidency last year to make sure that bioeconomy becomes an important, if not one of the central pillars of climate agenda? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lev. Hello, everyone. Greetings from São Paulo, Brazil. Almost 10:20 here, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. My pleasure to be with you. I am a strong admirer of the work that FAO has been putting together in all these decades, and really important to connect bioeconomy with agriculture and with the UN. So you are the leading players on that end. And my pleasure to be with amazing panelists, and to my privilege to speak right after Ruth, which is someone whose expertise and it's something that we admire, and for us to build on her considerations as well. From a Brazilian perspective, it's important to remember that it's a full circle. So the Rio Conventions started here in Rio back in 1992, when the Earth Convention took place, in a moment where the world was also in a major crisis. We just had the fall of the Western Wall in Berlin, the end of the Soviet Union. Brazil was facing an impeachment. It was really chaotic at that moment, but it was an amazing meeting. We decided to establish the Rio Convention, so the one on climate, the one on biodiversity, and the one on desertification. And since then, a lot has been accomplished. And Paris Agreement was accomplished 10 years ago. We diverted the world from the route that we were taking to increasing 4 degrees the global temperatures. We made a plan to try to bring it to 1.5. Now we will have to review the plan after 10 years. I think it depends where you are. In some geographies, it's been very polarizing. In others, there is a lot of excitement. We know that if you asked 10 years ago who would lead the global electricity transition for vehicles, we wouldn't bet in the current champion. So I think it's been quite a journey so far. Moving forward on the bioeconomy agenda, I think we'll have first a global idea as the COP of implementation. This is the moment where the climate solutions must come together after 10 years. And there are many projects. One of them that I'm very keen about from the Brazilian presidency, which is building a climate environment from the voluntary carbon markets to the regulated carbon markets, something between the regulated and the global carbon market that was built in Paris. So something between that we are calling the common carbon market. So trying to connect those who have already regulated their carbon market. So I think this will be a powerful idea that will help to foster many resources that Ruth mentioned that will be necessary to make the bioeconomy transition. And what is that transition? I think it has 5 layers. The first layer is a very important one, is what the world expects from Brazil, and especially from a COP inside the Amazon region, inside the Amazon forest, the biggest world biome, which is conservation. How can we keep global biodiversity preserved? How can we support traditional communities that are the responsible for preserving 80% of biodiversity on Earth? And how can we shift incentives and we stop looking at them as, oh, they are just traditional people, poor people, let's see how can we help them, into building something more meaningful on how can we really use their support and do things differently so they can be more effective on the function of preserving that they've been performing by themselves. So conservation, we have one instrument called TFFF, which is the Tropical Forever Facility, which will be something that we will disclose in COP30 in further detail, but it's far more than just resources for conservation. It is a governance mechanism that we do think that will be a game changer for conservation as a whole. The second layer is the big layer. We won't have in 5 minutes all the possibility to disclose this, but it's important to state, which is the one on the transition for agriculture. And Brazil is an agriculture powerhouse. We do need to transition for a more bio-friendly agriculture, so using less chemicals and pesticides and more bio inputs. And it has been the case in Brazil. It has been super efficient. Industry has been following that path as well. We need to intensify and to loop the solutions to make them come together shortly, and while we take and remove carbon from the atmosphere. So there is a whole discussion on agriculture, which will be very powerful, very central to COP. The third one is social bioeconomy. So how can we really not only use conservation as a tool, but also work with traditional communities in non-commoditized items, things that go beyond what we produce today. Nowadays, 92% of everything mankind eats comes from 15 different species. This could be enlarged for hundreds of species, and we need to see a future more positive with more nutrients and ingredients in our shelves that will be more fresh and that will change the way that mankind consumes. So that's a very important role for COP to play. I'm almost finalizing. The fourth one is how can we build the mechanisms for reforestation, and there are many new initiatives. We had the COP16 in Riyadh, the desertification one, with clear targets on how many hectares we need to bring back, and degraded land will be a must, so we don't deforest anymore, but we recover degraded land. So there is a huge amount of land, and reforestation will play a major role, and that bioeconomy will follow that. And finally, as Lev mentioned so well, there is the whole work on biotech and biofuels, right? So how can we bring the bioeconomy to shift and to replace non-renewables, and how SAF and maritime freight will work on biofuels on a new capacity, paving the way for the logistics of the future, the logistics that will allow us to emit far less or transform to net zero, and how green hydrogen will come in and play. And while we are not there yet, how biofuels will play that role. So I think those are the elements. And just to wrap up, there is the dream of COP since COP1, which is how can we build the timetable with the reverse of subsidies for non-renewables. I think that was one of the purposes that Angela Merkel, that was the general director of COP1, tried to put together. And we've been taking that decision for 30 COPs and have not achieved that yet. We need to achieve that. We need to place clearly how much incentives we are nowadays placing for non-renewables, and start discussing when they will transition away. Not only one sentence of transitioning away from fossil fuels, but having a clear plan with clear targets, moving from one to the other. So this is my wrap up and initial remarks. Lev, thank you so much.
Marcello, thank you so much. It's impressive agenda. I mean, really, congratulations for the leadership of the country, your leadership as a special envoy. It's really, you're presenting this truly, how to say, holistic, but at the same time practical, given the priorities of and the realities of the day we are living in. How to bring this bioeconomy discussion in the climate negotiations. And I mean, can only agree with you, this big elephant in the room, repurposing and dealing with the subsidies, which is one actually of the major stumbling blocks for bioeconomy to advance. So really impressive agenda. Thank you. I'm sure we will return again to some of aspects you covered during this conversation today. I think Marcello almost like make a very good segue because he spoke about land. He spoke about land restoration, and our next speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce Ksenia Scanlon. Ksenia is the Chief of Communications and External Relations at the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Ksenia has over 20 years of experience across several multilateral institutions, international ones, including UNEP, WWF, IUCN, and the list goes on. She worked on biodiversity, on land restoration. She also worked on the malaria partnerships. But her work today is really amplifying all this knowledge and experience for the benefit of sustainable solutions for land. So Ksenia, my question to you today, how you believe that the concept of bioeconomy, which might be relatively new to the UNCCD, but nevertheless very important one, can help to ensure land stewardship. Where do you see the opportunities? How you see this integration of bioeconomy principles into sustainable land management agenda?
Thank you very much, Lev. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all the participants and to the fellow panelists. And thank you very much already to Professor Onyango, but also to Marcello Bihart for referencing land. And really for us, land is what connects all those multiple agendas. We do appreciate that, of course, bioeconomy extends both to terrestrial and marine habitats, but in a lot of cases, and from the perspective of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, healthy land underpins a sustainable bioeconomy. We know that more than half of natural capital comes from nature. We also know that we are degrading this natural capital, and particularly land, at very unsustainable and terrifying rates. Every year, we're losing an equivalent of a country the size of Egypt to land degradation. This is happening, and we know that to actually break even and reach the global goal of land degradation neutrality between now and 2030, we do need, and Marcello, you mentioned the number of hectares that we need to restore. Just a few years back, we thought it was going to be 1 billion hectares. Now we know that to break even, we will need to restore 1.5 billion hectares of degraded land. Moreover, 1/4 of those degraded hectares is abandoned or degraded agricultural land, farmland. So this is a very strong and compelling area of focus for us as UNCCD and with partners such as FAO and many, many others, where we can actually achieve a lot of progress if we focus our efforts on restoring those landscapes back to productivity through conservation agriculture, other approaches. This is where the opportunity lies. We also know, and today I would like to talk about, of course, land, but also about people, which is, again, a very important area that the convention focuses on. We are about creating sustainable livelihoods. We are about, and I think, Lev, in your opening remarks, you already referenced the importance of inclusivity, importance of equity, importance of empowering those communities and individuals that actually depend on those resources first and foremost, and very often find themselves marginalized, be it pastoralists, be it indigenous communities, etc. So we really do also look at it from the prism of UNCCD as being the only global agreement that deals with issues of land tenure. And we do have a significant body of decisions on this topic. So that is the second part. And let me turn to the third part, which is, of course, the big question about money, right? How are we going to find the resources that we need to achieve those goals? And I'm sure that it's on many a mind these days. What we know is that to achieve the objective of combating desertification, land degradation, and drought between now and 2030, we need to roughly invest $1 billion a day. Now, that sounds like a lot. But again, we already referenced that a lot of money has been going into areas that might be harmful for healthy ecosystems, for healthy land. We also know that if we do invest this amount of money, we would see the benefits ranging between $7 and $30 on each of the dollar invested in land restoration and drought resilience, for instance. And here again, and this is to Professor Onyango, Africa has the largest land restoration potential, and perhaps some of the biggest benefits that can be reaped from this exercise. And actually, Africa at the moment has more hectares pledged for restoration than the hectares that have been degraded. So that's quite an extraordinary positive balance that exists. Last but not least, today we're celebrating World Environment Day. In just less than 2 weeks' time, we will also be marking Desertification and Drought Day. This year, we're focusing on land restoration under the theme of Restore the Land, Unlock the Opportunities. So I do invite all of us to unlock those opportunities, contribute to the sustainable and inclusive bioeconomy and the global land restoration, climate and biodiversity goals. Thank you.
Tanya, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, I think you were connecting this so important elements in advancing bioeconomy. So this connection between land ownership, stewardship, and tenure, but at the same time, really recognizing that without bringing together the stewards of land, we will fail. And this is exactly where. So this bioeconomy, again, so your intervention is so important to emphasize this element of communities, local communities, whom we have to bring on board. And everyone from smallholder farmer to biotechnology scientists have important contribution to make. No, thank you very much. And I think in this vein, it's also, I'm again very pleased to introduce our next speaker, who is the head of Access and Benefit Sharing Unit under Nagoya Protocol in the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're moving now from climate change, land, and now we are moving to the Biodiversity Convention. I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Takonjo Shikongo. Sorry, my apology. Takonjo brings both his own experience as a traditional leader and also career focus very much on global biodiversity conservation, and now very rich experience in negotiating under the CBD framework. Takonjo, given your unique perspective as both a traditional leader and negotiator at a global level, how do you see the Convention on Biological Diversity, and especially Nagoya Protocol, evolving in ensuring that indigenous peoples and local communities not only have equitable access to benefits, but also play a central role, as we are discussing today on multiple occasions, to shape bioeconomy development, and especially to empower and not only just take into account interests, but truly empower local indigenous peoples and local communities in these developments?
Thank you, Lev, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody out there. Thank you for that question. I think at the onset, it is important to point out that the concept of bioeconomy within the convention has not been fully agreed upon, but within the global biodiversity framework context, what is sort of agreed is to see it as sustainable biodiversity-based activities, products and services that enhances biodiversity. Now, if we look at this from within the CBD lens and also that of indigenous and local communities, what we'll see is that the CBD has over time been a significant global trendsetter and also a pacemaker. If we set the stage in 1992, Marcelo pointed out that the conventions were born in Rio 1992. At that stage, recognition and protection of traditional knowledge was assured through the provisions of Article 8J of the convention, which simply stated that parties should respect, preserve, maintain knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities, and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge. And that article has today led to the creation of a program of work on this article by the indigenous people and local communities themselves last year in Cali. We've also seen the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body to elevate IPLEC issues in the CBD processes and greater inclusion of indigenous people and local communities in biodiversity policy making and implementation. Now, an interesting offshoot from this article was the establishment and empowerment of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, the IIFB, and it was formed in COP 3 in 1996, and this forum has become a very powerful platform for indigenous people and local communities to coordinate their participation, to advocate for the inclusion of their rights and issues, and also influence key decisions, including those that relate to access and benefit sharing, protected areas, and traditional knowledge. And of recent, 2015 we saw in the negotiations of the convened Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework also the inclusion of the issues of IPLCs, and that the adoption of the KMGBF explicitly recognizes the leadership and rights of indigenous people and local communities in biodiversity conservation and use. It also recognizes the need for equitable governance of biodiversity and social justice through fair and equitable benefit sharing, and then the importance of free, prior, and informed consent in all biodiversity-related actions, as well as the inclusion of different value systems that are underpinning different knowledge systems and worldviews. And so that framework provides a shift towards co-governance and rights-based conservation, aligning global biodiversity goals with indigenous values and stewardship, some of the issues that were pointed out by our colleagues. Now, if we pull all of this together, as we move forward, this concept of bioeconomy, it has a certain duality, or I would say a two-edged sword, and that is that it can either, it has the risk of exploitation versus opportunity for empowerment. And that means it can either empower IPLCs by recognizing and valuing their traditional knowledge systems related to genetic resources, and therefore offering new avenues for sustainable livelihoods and involving them in ethical bioprospecting and benefit sharing. On the other hand, the other edge of the sword, it can exploit IPLCs if implemented through top-down extractive models that replicate colonial patterns, such as using these traditional knowledge, innovation and practices without consent or fair compensation. And so to address this two-edged sword means that the success of this bioeconomy depends heavily on inclusive governance, free, prior, informed consent, and equitable benefit sharing mechanisms. And these are issues of core that are quite considered in the CBD processes. And then secondly, this bioeconomy also provides an opportunity to redefine development models at all levels. And we know that indigenous people and local communities have long practiced forms of what we can call bioeconomy that was rooted in reciprocity, ecological balance, cultural values, etc. However, if we look at mainstream bioeconomy models, they often prioritize market-driven high-tech solutions using, for instance, synthetic biology and biofuels. And these may undermine traditional practices and local communities, and also may lead to land grabs, resource conflicts, and loss of sovereignty over biological resources. So if we have models that are supported by IPLCs and that are led by IPLCs, then this can become quite a transformative tool for climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, and cultural revitalization. Concluding, last year in Cali, the Cali Fund, as part of the multilateral mechanism on digital sequence information, was established, and it was launched this year in Rome. And this fund makes provision that at least half of the funds will be distributed to IPLCs in developing and developed countries to fund their self-identified needs as expressed in either the national biodiversity strategy action plans or other national planning documents. And so I think this, the unfolding of the Cali Fund, and which is quite interesting because it's quite innovative, and it will receive its contributions from the private sector, and therefore it's not a charity, not a donor initiative, but rather paying back for nature, for having used nature. And putting IPLCs central into that provides significant opportunities. But for that, we all need to come to the table, work together in a positive spirit of goodwill and collaboration. Thank you.
Konjo, thank you so much. Again, you not only gave us specific perspectives and information about relevant developments in the CBD, but I think you truly brought this basically the fundamental challenge of bioeconomy development, because it is about sustainable use of biological resources. And we always say at FAO and elsewhere when we speak about bioeconomy, there is just what we want to build. We just don't want to build bioeconomy. We want to build a sustainable bioeconomy. And trade-offs certainly are real, significant, as well as opportunities. And I think thank you so much for bringing this this important perspective that so how to reconcile, let's say, the development of biotechnologies and applying biological sciences, but doing this in a way that we are also not only protecting indigenous knowledge and knowledge of indigenous and local communities, but we're also co-producing knowledge. And I think this is also one of the main challenges, right? Co-produce.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful intervention. I think so. Now I'm returning back to Ruth and Marcello. I think we wanna. So let's say I don't necessarily say that we go from the global now to local level, but I really would very much welcome and appreciate to hear from Ruth and then from Marcello about maybe a couple practical examples how bioeconomy was developed, how you experienced in your life specific bioeconomy developments which had benefits to communities. So the practical examples, I think for our audience also to have a little bit closer feel what happens on the ground when we talk about bioeconomy. Ruth, please, the floor is yours.
Lev, I don't know that it was called bioeconomy at that time. You know, you come up with these terminologies and, you know, move out there with them and you come back to the local communities and you don't even know what to say, you know, and you discover that that's what they have been doing all along, you know, trying to survive, you know. And that's what I did, you know, when I went to the ground and slowly imagine working with the smallholder farmers, particularly women, and trying to get them to grow indigenous crops, bringing back the foods that we used to eat, and also to adopt what used to be local farming systems that I knew about, you know, and integrated farming and intercropping and having animals and plants and it's more sustainable. And it was not until 10 years later someone told me, Ruth, what have you done in this community? And I said, what have I done? You know, it looks different. And to tell you the truth, up to now, it is still there. It is on a small scale, but I've just realized that our own old African systems of farming were sustainable and our own foods were more richer, more nutritious, and they keep you healthier than what we eat today. So that I know for sure has happened, and that's already 40 years out. But of course, with the climate coming in, it's a big challenge for them. And how are they coping? We don't go to them to seek any answers from them. And so the way I went to the ground we need to go back to these communities, not asking them to come and attend this convention, after convention, spending a lot of money, and we could use a fraction of that to make a difference in people's lives on the ground. Secondly, there's one project I was involved in just recently. It involved people around forests. And Marcelo, thank you so much. I've been to Brazil, and you are you are God favored, having that Amazon. And so when we were working with the people around forests, and they go into the forest, they get their food from there, they get their medicine from there, and at the end of the day, the local government was saying, we have to build a fence to keep people out of the forest. And yet, we had already engaged these people. We had shown them how to plant other things like vegetables, to enrich their diets. And we had engaged them. They said, if we know that what we are doing with the forests affects everybody else in the world, not just us in a negative sense, we are ready to protect the forest. So do we involve them? Do we ask them? They have been privileged to be around the forest, and we want to keep them out of the forest. And actually, I put out my advocacy hat, and I said, there's no way you are going to keep people out of the forest. It's just their livelihood, and they are lucky to be around there. Let them take care of the forest, and let them understand that it's not just Kenya which is being affected, but as far as Switzerland or Rome, where you are, is also being affected. And then finally, I serve on the Bioeconomy Advisory Committee. When you met me in Nairobi at the summit, I served there. I've been there for a while out of ICIPE, and we've been privileged to give grants to organizations in the countries, a number of them, 8 here in Eastern Africa where we work. And we've had universities working with the communities, working with the private sector, and bringing things like insects back into our diets. And really, isn't that just sustainable, and doesn't that save the environment? And also looking at soils and seeing how we can actually avoid fossil fuels and all synthetic fertilizers to actually grow crops. And it can be possible. Many people say, unless you use all these synthetic fertilizers, you cannot feed the world. But I think for me, we need to go community by community, share examples a lot more, and actually just make sure that we appreciate what goes on locally, what people have done over the years, and also give them hope, and also say that we are going to learn from this. Yeah.
Ruth, it's truly impressive. How in 5 minutes you would be really able to cover so much. No, thank you so much. It's really inspiring. All the stories. So thank you. Thank you so much. I think I'm moving to Marcello now. Marcello, the floor is yours. Your experience.
It's sort of impossible to follow Ruth's statement, right? That's an impossible mission. But I'll try to do my best, Ruth. And I really love to hear Taujongo's, Senya's perspective as well. I'm just going to give you 2 quick examples on bioeconomy on the ground and on practical terms. And I think, to be honest, I'll make it 3. But I'll make it fast, I promise. The first one is on big agriculture, which I think is the big elephant in the room for FAO. We need to shift, and I think the big shift will come from bio inputs for agriculture. And I think that there is already a lot going on that space. And for us to expand that capacity to curb down the need that we have from pesticides and fertilizers into more bio inputs. And I think this is already happening. It's a revolution ongoing. It must be accelerated. It must use a lot of science, so we are not messing up also efficiency, which is crucial if you want to feed well the 10 billion people that are coming. And I do think that we have all the capacities just for us to coordinate better. So that's from the ground, but it's on large scale. On a smaller scale, on my previous company, we had a very interesting experience with traditional communities. In one specific Amazonian community, there was a tree called ucuuba that used to be chopped down and sold to the southern part of Brazil to become roofs and broomsticks. And we used a lot of science and understood that with half of the seeds that the tree would produce, we could create a whole new line of products that would be very efficient for personal care. And we could pay 3 times more for half of the seeds than what the community would have for the wood of the tree in itself. So immediately the community stopped chopping and started to plant because they wanted to expand their capacity, and the money was already flowing in. So it would allow not only the tree that was on the verge of extinction to be replanted, but to expand the production. This is a very practical example on how business are the force for change on communities, and how can we bring the rationality of new elements for different uses and shifting the way that we produce instead of taking down into replanting, into regenerating. So this is one very practical example. And finally, there is here in Sao Paulo, and I've seen these all over the world, very different movements, farm to table ones, recovering the green belts outside of the cities to expand the local biodiversity and the plants that are aborigines from different regions. I think this is something that must be improved and expanded as well with the new logistics that we are able to do. So the farm to table movement can move beyond just the facility of social media into a very practical way of nourishing better, especially the people in the outskirts of the big cities. So for us to help this new movement to expand and to become global more and more, I think it's a must. So expanding green belts in the outskirts, it's something that I think we should all aim for.
Marcelo, thank you so much. If you allow me, may I? So you again, because of your experience, also significant experience in the private sector. So we do often mention that bioeconomy offers a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, and in the current landscape and lacking financial resources. And especially because at what you brought in your first intervention, significant still ongoing subsidies, not only fossil fuels, but also in agriculture and harmful practices in agriculture. How can we mobilize investments? How can we support often, for sure, small and medium and even micro enterprises which are struggling in this landscape while promoting those sustainable solutions? How can we mobilize resources at scale?
Well, that's the holy grail for sustainability, right? In a nutshell, I would say that we have to realign the 4 big dimensions and the 4 big metrics. When you're a chief sustainability officer, you come across hundreds of metrics and hundreds of ways of counting, but I think 4 of them are the most important ones. For climate, it would be IPCC for science, it will be the NDCs for public policy, SBTI for corporations, and TCFD for finance. On nature, we should have the same discipline. Those elements are not well integrated yet, but we do have IPBS for science, we do have the NBSAPs for public policy, we do have SBTN for nature, and TNFD for finance. What I think we should really be aiming for is globally, the global GDP is around, rough numbers, $100 trillion. And we're always saying, oh, we need more resources, etc. But what we really need is to relocate the current resources that are producing the GDP of $100 trillion per year, not to emit the 35 million gigatons, nor to chop down the 23 million hectares of forests globally. So what we need is to get the current resources and to locate them, to know where they're being used and how they're being used, so we can make the better choices with the current economy without having to reinvent the wheel, which is the ab ovo syndrome that sometimes we have in sustainability, trying to start everything from scratch. The world won't stop. Things will keep moving, but we need to move on the positive way, on the positive side of things. So connecting those 4 dimensions, I think, is the work of the Rio Conventions. It's what we need to establish and to help give more visibility and more guidance. COP30 hopefully will be a moment where the 3 Rio Conventions will come together and those 4 elements will be better connected.
Marcello, thank you. Can only agree, and I think you're also bringing up the importance of measuring, right? The importance of metrics. And for bioeconomy, we are still, again, thanks to the leadership of Brazil and the adoption of high-level principles of bioeconomy at G20. But I think there is a lot of work which we still have to do. And as you said, just bringing all these 4 dimensions together, because otherwise it's so what you don't measure, you don't know, and you cannot change it. So no, thank you for bringing it up to this conversation. And I'm looking, so I know that unfortunately Ksenia probably had to leave. I don't know, I don't see if she's still around with us. But Taukondru, if you would like to add to this discussion we just had with Ruth and Marcello. So please join us.
Thank you. I'm kind of in a challenged situation, seeing that I am part of the CBD and the UN family, and not now on the ground that I can speak of from my on the ground experiences. But what I can add to this is that perhaps we have to rethink and relook at all of us and ask us in this venture, what makes us really strong? Is it the way that we do similar things, or does it lie in how different we are? And isn't that difference the basis of life on this planet? The very basis of this convention, biodiversity. And if that is so, then inclusivity, respect, and tolerance for diversity of approaches, value systems will be needed. And this is also within the spirit of the Convened Montreal Global Values Framework that is calling for all of these to happen within a whole of society, whole of government, and I would say whole of multilateralism approach. And if we can all come to that, and perhaps also look at what the ways in which we communicate to the different stakeholders and the ways we stereotype them, and perhaps it's a time for us to relook at industry, academia and research, and IPLC, and ask what is there perhaps a larger role for them at the table, and can they be full partners, and then perhaps engendering a focus on behavioral change and addressing root causes and not simply the symptoms of the things that we have been discussing here. Let me stop there.
Gonjo, thank you very much again for this call for inclusivity, and indeed this is the basis. This is because we are, I think we're at this time right now asking the truly fundamental questions, and at the end of the day, this is this phrase of how we can make peace with nature. I mean, how humanity, how far we moved, I believe, in the wrong direction, even posing this question, being at the end of the day part of nature. And I think that at least bioeconomy, because of this holistic systemic nature, because of this fundamental focus not only on biological resources, but also on bringing together traditional knowledge, bringing together traditional practices on one side, but on the other side, trying to embrace this new developments in science, from artificial intelligence, the biotechnology, and so on. It's really a concept which at least aims to reconcile, to turn us back to nature. But this is again that all your inputs and conversations, again, there are enormous opportunities, but equally enormous risks. And they're very context specific. They are context specific in terms of issues we are covering, but I think they're also context specific in terms of regions and localities we have to apply it. And I think it's so important that you brought this issue from one side. We are one, but we also have different perspectives. And I think again that what we, at least at FAO, what we are trying, we deliberately avoiding the using the bioeconomy as a term, because there are many different bioeconomies, and I think we have to learn. We have so much to learn from each other in applying this concept to local contexts. No, thank you so much. I'm looking at our audience. I mean, we have. Again, we have over 80 participants today, and I saw there were even more, close to 100 at the beginning, but people are coming and new people joining, and also, so I really encourage you, please pose your questions in the chat that we have now. We have less than half an hour left. I still would like to give an opportunity to our panelists to conclude this really inspiring conversation with their brief reflections. But we have now maybe 15 minutes time to engage with you. So I'm looking at the chat right now, and my colleagues. We have one question, very important one. And I think we have a reflection on this question in the chat. So obviously, from the beginning of bioeconomy development, there was this conversation: do we have enough biological resources to replace basically the fossil-based economy? And do we have enough biomass essentially to satisfy needs of the society? I think so. This is the question from Martin. And again, I'm looking at our speakers who would like to start demystifying this. Marcello, I see that you, would you like to start?
So yes, I'd love to start, and I think this is the big elephant in the room, right? So this is for us to start bringing the attention to the fact that I gave the example in my initial speech, and I think if you asked any of us 10 years ago who we would see transitioning away from fossil fuels to electrify its fleet, probably we would say some European country, etc. We wouldn't place our bet in China, which has the largest fleet to do it, and now has shifted for over 52% of its fleet on running by electricity. Of course, energy is a major concern because it's the biggest emitter on Earth. But on the second hand, who would say that solar panels would also be as efficient as they are and would be electrifying Africa as intensely as they are nowadays? And even the inner lands of Brazil, we just started a very interesting experience running traditional communities in the Amazon with electric power coming from solar panels without the need to use any diesel or anything like that from non-renewables. So a big hopes coming from the energy sector and the renewable energy sector. I think the honest answer to your question is probably there is already biomass enough on Earth, although there are not the economic incentives put in place to allow this to be feasible. But the economic incentives might be going to the wrong direction. Reason why having clarity on the subsidies aspect of the puzzle is crucial for bringing the resources that will be feasible to bring biomass to where it should be. And I think it goes beyond energy. I think it goes to materials as well. This year, probably the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has been working on a project on the Global Circularity Protocol. You know, the institution was the one who put together the GHG protocol, the Greenhouse Gases Protocol. So it allows us to have visibility on all the emission factors 15 years ago. Now we know exactly what are the proportions between carbon and methane. I don't want to get too technical, but we have a common denominator for emissions. We'll have a common denominator for materials as well, which will allow circularity solutions to be achieved and to replace plastics as well. So if we place the right incentives, bioeconomy will be the fuel and the center of the global circularity new reality. And I think tropical areas globally will have a totally different role and a totally different capacity to fulfill this new economy. We are moving away from a fossil-based economy into a solar-powered economy. And this will reshift somehow not only economic sector, also geopolitics somehow, and society as a whole. What science has been telling us is that we don't have a lot of time to do that. So we do have the climate pressure, but I think the nature pressure is even stronger because tipping points are being reached, and tipping points, once they are reached, there is no point of return. It's just adaptation, and adaptation can mean having a very more difficult conditions in the year to come. The good news is we did already solve very complex problems. We did already got into a very controversial and many doubts around what was happening if those who are older than me and who are at my age remember well, which was the ozone layer challenge. So it was a global challenge produced by the industry, by industrialization, just like the one on emissions. And we didn't have WhatsApp groups nor social media, but we were able to coordinate globally a global effort from developed countries, developing countries, to everyone stop emitting CFC gases in the atmosphere. And nowadays, not only no one talks about the ozone layer issue, but the ozone layer is being covered up. And so sometimes we forget that we know how to take global action. We know how to shape global changes. So this now is one that not only will correct a factor of stress like the ozone layer, but will create many new opportunities for countries who nowadays are considered poor, that will change its capacity, since they will be the powerhouses of the bioeconomy, and that will make a better way for living and for nurturing ourselves. So for us to help to pave this bright future ahead. Lev, thank you so much.
Angelo, thank you so much for this very positive look. I mean, we really need this. We need this message that we can. We can if we truly work together. And again, the success of action on the ozone layer ozone hole is a clear manifestation of this. Thank you very much. I see also the question from Adrian Vargas. Adrian is asking us, I'm just reading it now. I think the question is for Marcella and Tauconjo. What are the prospects of the new WIPO Treaty on Intellectual Property Genetic Resources and the associated traditional knowledge in the development of sustainable, inclusive, biodiversity-driven bioeconomy? I think it's a new development under World Intellectual Property Organization Treaty, which is certainly very closely connected to our discussion today. And I'm looking at maybe that Marcello can have can briefly. I can ask Tauconjo to start conversation, and then Marcello, you would like to step in. Tauconjo, would you like to take up this question?
Yeah, thank you. It is indeed an interesting question. That new treaty took almost more than 20 years to conclude. I think the first round of consultations, fact-finding mission took place around 1999. And so it was quite a breakthrough when it has now come to its conclusion. It has definitely implications for what we are discussing here, and it also has implication for the work of the convention here, as traditional knowledge is quite key. And as I've mentioned before, we now have the approved subsidiary body on Article 8J and other provisions, which will have its first meeting in Panama. And since mutually supportiveness is quite an important element in multilateralism, we from the CBD are actually engaged with them, and we've been following that process from the perspective of action benefit sharing, but also from the perspective of indigenous people and local communities as regards Article 8J. It is progress. It means more work for all of us, and it calls for more synergies, more integration, and more mainstreaming amongst all involved. Thank you.
Very good. So I think this is a sharp question and a very important one on the theme of not only intellectual property for traditional communities, but there is a question behind it, which is who owns biodiversity, right? So there is a legal question, which is a very important and a meaningful one, and and there are many answers, and I think many of them are correct. But I would assume that nature has its ownership in itself, mankind has ownership in itself. Traditional communities certainly have a major role to play because they are the ones who are preserving and they are protecting, and so they should be paid for it. And it has been a long discussion, right? Since the Cartagena Protocol, the Nagoya Protocol, there has been a film on this discussion on how we are stating, addressing, and bringing those elements. The company I used to work with, we always pay for benefit sharing with traditional communities, and I think this is a must. We must understand how can we combine the efforts of access for benefit sharing, traditional knowledge, and the use of biodiversity. On the other hand, there will be, and the industry always is keen to present the fact that AI and other forms of knowledge also will create their own ways to work with the genetics, that it's not directly attached to what has been the use and the traditional use of the species, which creates an issue on legitimacy. But I do think that those who preserve and who conserve do have the entitlement for having the not only the soil, the species, and the biodiversity being given to all of us. So I personally, and this is a very personal opinion, I do strongly believe that we should support traditional communities, and we should be behind all the efforts to divert back the resources for traditional knowledge in terms of preservation and biodiversity. So I think there is no final answer to this, but the WIPO Treaty presents that challenge and presents that question, and it will be a film for us, I think, to pave a way in which traditional communities will get more and more for the great things that they do for mankind and for nature in itself. The world I want to live in is a world where traditional knowledges and traditional communities are respected and rewarded for the great that they do to all of us.
Thank you very much for this feedback. We have another question from Hugo. We are surpassing several safe operating space boundaries for humanity. and more resources are needed. And I think so the forecast, if we continue business as usual, obviously the biomass consumption will increase. Like there are different numbers by I think 30 or 50% by 2050. So we certainly, if we continue on the same path, and especially if we want to replace fossil-based resources and services and so on, we need to produce more biomass. And I think Hugo is asking, do we need to reset our limits in what we can maximally and minimally can do? I think, again, this is donut economics, and I mean, the limits to growth, probably. Sorry, Hugo, I'm extending your question. But I think, our speakers understand that way you're bringing us. So please, this is a practical and philosophical question. And indeed, I fully agree, very relevant to our discussion today. So who would like to step in?
I think I can try and step in there.
Konja, please.
The fundamental question there is are we on the planet ready to, as I've said before, address root causes? And are we ready to undergo behavioral change and address consumption patterns, which again goes back to addressing our own behavior? Change is always called for, but changing is quite difficult because we as a species like to continue doing what we've always done. And if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And I think also what history is showing us is that no one learns from history. Although we always refer to history, but and the examples are there why we should actually change if we are to survive. But we keep on changing the goalpost, keep on changing the terminology. It's the same thing, just repackaged. And so, and we also perhaps need to ask why questions more instead of trying to answer how questions. And in the why, adaptively, we can find then what it is that we need to do and not how to do it, and then simply just do it. I've answered back in a philosophical manner. Thank you.
Gonzo, what a wonderful feedback. I'm sure Ruth and Marcello would like to add to this debate. So please, we have few more minutes left, but I really would love to hear from you both.
Shikongo said it exactly the way it is. You know, we keep just changing terminologies and doing the same thing over and over again. I've seen this over the years, and they say if we don't change, change will change us. And I think as far as the survival of the earth and being cognizant of having wrecked the earth, we've not been kind to Mother Nature. This is the time to change. And we just have to do an about turn. I've been talking about indigenous knowledge for a long time. Marcello, thank you so much. We have to go back to Mother Nature. We just have to go back to where we started, you know, come back to Africa. That's where humanity started. And I believe it may not happen in my lifetime, but I believe that what happens in Africa, if we don't continue to destroy ourselves, if we go back and look deeply into what we have in Africa, Mother Nature, that's where the answers are. And really, we just have to do things properly. Otherwise, the world, I think I'm looking at it ending very soon. But thank you, Shikongo. You know, you are so philosophical about it. And thank you, Marcello. You know, this is a great panel. And thank you, Lev. You know, really, I don't think we have the answers. I don't have the answers. I don't claim to, but we need to continue talking and questioning ourselves and offering whatever ideas, and maybe one consensus idea will come up, and then we see some light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Marcello, the floor is yours.
Well, this is really an impossible act to follow, because Tekonjo, you presented so philosophically well everything I believe. Really love to hear your words, very wise. Ruth, I strongly believe that everything started in Africa, and what Africa leads the way will be the way for mankind as well. And I'm sure that there is a bright way ahead in which we will reach ourselves and that we will provide solutions to our people. I think the question that Hugo de Vries presents as Lev, I would go in the direction of reading our dear friend Kate Raworth and Professor Johan Rockstrom with Planetary Boundaries and the Limits, etc. But there is an issue on the assumption that the world only follows the traditional path from industrial revolution, which I don't think it's correct. I think that's not the right assumption. There is not only one way moving forward. There are many ways moving forward. Problem number one. And problem number two is considering that the world is just a replication of the North Atlantic pattern, and this will be the standard for everyone, which I also do not believe. And I do think that reverse course of actions are needed, north and south. Of course, no one can leave, and mankind won't be a big supermarket with plastics all over it and having waste being the third country on earth production. So you have Europe, you have the US, and then you have waste. There is a lot of waste going on, and we need to tackle that sooner rather than later. And on the tipping points, I think they must be adapted to the realities of the developing world as well. So there are people who are far beyond the poverty line, and they must come. And so the planet boundaries, I think there must be different boundaries for different societies and for different shapes. Some of them will have to decrease, some of them will have to increase for us to have some honest discussions and to have the right visibility on who's entitled to what, so we can live on a world that will be certainly more peaceful and more just. That's what the just transition is all about. It's one of the elements that we'll be thoroughly discussing in November this year in COP30.
Marcello, thank you so much. I think it's what a precious gift this panel was today on the World Environment Day. Thank you so much. I really regret to say that we are reaching the end of our really inspiring conversation today. I would sincerely want to thank our wonderful panelists. Again, sorry that Ksenia had to leave us earlier because she had a trip, but truly inspiring conversation. We made the recording, and this dialogue will be available online for those who were not able to join us today. But it was truly inspiring, really covering so many aspects. And I think what especially me personally appreciated, that all of you put bioeconomy in the context of global change. And I mean this global change, not only environmental, but societal and political and economic. And I think this is the place where this transformative concept deserves. And I think you really gave us an amazing not introduction, but deep dive, I would say, in the place of bioeconomy there. So sincerely, thank you so much. I also would like to thank EMG Secretariat for hosting this Nexus dialogue, and bioeconomy team at FAO who worked behind the scenes to make it a true success. Thank you so much, and happy World Environment Day to everyone. Thank you. Goodbye.